here to talk to Saumya Roy, the author of an extraordinary book called Mountain Tales. The full title is Mountain Tales, Love and Loss in the Municipality of Castaway Belongings. But before I start talking to Saumya, I would like to read two reviews about the book by authors that we all know and admire. The first is from Kiran Desai, Booker Prize winner and the author of Inheritance of Loss. She says, Roy has a journalist's unflinching eye, a poet's talent for detail, and a radical sense of empathy. Urgent as a thriller, yet lingering in its unforgettable portraits of life, love, and death, Mountain Tales deserves every accolade, a stunning achievement. And I will read one more because you will get many different perspectives about why this book is so extraordinary and has so many people so electrified. So this is from Geeta Anand, Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist and author of The Cure. It is rare that a book is a deeply moving love story with unforgettable characters while also illuminating a country and a culture. Saumya Roy's book is a riveting love story set in the harrowing world of life as a trash picker. Read it for a most delicious story. Read it to understand India. If you read one book about India, read this one. Congratulations, Saumya Roy. I can't tell you, I don't know if I do justice with the words I have to describe your book, but it is really an accomplishment, an outstanding accomplishment. So over to you. In your words, tell us what the book is about.
So thank you for your very kind and generous words, all too generous if I may say so.
No, I've not said these things.
My thanks to Crossword for having me on their show. I've of course been going to their bookstore since as long as I can remember, and it's a total pleasure to be here with them, and I thank them for their generosity in having me. My book actually is about the Deonar dumping grounds, the garbage dumping grounds of Mumbai. All of the city's garbage has been going there for 122 years. They are over 300 acres large. This is what is often called a landfill, but because the garbage has risen over the years, they now form actually garbage mountains that are 120 feet high. The only thing that has left here has left in the hands of waste pickers who troll these mountains. They pick up all the garbage that the city sends, segregate it, sort it, and resell it to traders to be remade anew. So I followed, I was a journalist at one point, and I started a non-profit, and I used to support the livelihoods of some of these waste pickers among some other communities. And just out of curiosity, I began following these waste pickers and seeing what their life is like, what their work is like, their business is like over a period of 8 years. And so it's about their life, but it's also about our city, about our society, and hopefully it's saying something about policy and what makes these mountains.
How far is Deonar from where you live? How long did it take you to get there? I mean, very few people in Bombay even know of this phenomenon that is Deonar. And how did you travel back and forth? And how long does it take from where you reside to Deonar?
So it's not actually very far. It's the edge of Bombay, and as you cross Deonar, you're actually just at the toll bridge that takes you from Bombay to New Bombay and the mainland of the state. So it's not very far from my own house. It used to take about a little over an hour, but now it takes me even less. So which meant I was there all the time. But it's not actually very far, but it's a very different world. It's a world in itself.
You say that it never occurred to you to write a book about the subject until mysterious fires began breaking out in Deonar. Tell us about the fires and then what led you to document and research this book so thoroughly.
Yeah. So we began getting these waste pickers in 2013 to our office for loans, etc. And I was sort of very naturally curious about what is this work you're going to do, how are you going to use our loans? Our loans will go bad if we lend to you. And so they were aware of this curiosity, and they began bringing photos to the office to show me how their houses got flooded, how the Garbage Mountains looked, videos, stuff like that. I remember a borrower bringing a photograph of her dead mother to show me why she couldn't repay her loan, or just all the things they had brought back from the Garbage Mountains. And so
These
naturally,
loans, sorry, these loans were of what amounts to the rag pickers? I mean, give us a sense of.
So we would start with a very small sum like 5,000 rupees and then scale it up as we saw their businesses growing and then repaying well. And so I began following them back, and some of the older waste pickers would walk me through this place, show me their house made of waste, of plastic sheets, of saris, of tin sheets. So, what they wore. They often wore what they found in jewelry, clothes, ate the food that came, like ready-to-eat mixes that were coming into the city. They were cooking those and eating them for parties. I remember this girl telling me she found a stash of pencil pouches, and she collected them and gave them to her friends in school because she was a new girl in school and she wanted to make friends. And when she gifted them all of them pencil pouches, she was suddenly very popular, and she said they didn't know I hadn't bought them.
So you say also in the book that it was a reflection. You saw Bombay through its garbage.
Yes.
Tell us a little about that, the kind of garbage and how it evolved thanks to liberalization and globalization. And, there was a changing face of the garbage that arrived in Deonar. Tell us about that.
Yes, certainly. So the older waste pickers, many of them had made a life by picking cloth scraps. So the edges of cloth that tailors, when they stitch, then the edges of what is left, what they cut out, used to make Garbage Mountains. And the older waste pickers invariably worked with cloth scraps. But as we in the city began wearing ready-made clothes, cloth scraps shrank, became more, just a little mushy bits left, and they don't come to the Garbage Mountains as much. Thank you, Arzu, for your comment. I was thinking we could take the questions coming up here just after we are done,
yes,
so that we don't
yes.
interrupt the flow of our conversation, but we will take them up. So suddenly cloth scraps reduced as we began wearing more ready-made clothes. I started seeing a lot of foods that we never, takeaway boxes of food.
Tetra Pak boxes and more plastic.
Styrofoam cups for coffee. And many times the waste pickers would ask me, you think somebody drinks this coffee, like, in these cups and, such expensive coffee. So I found lots of makeup, young children. I have photographs of young children when they found blush on or eyeshadow, and they would use it, carefully blush it on to their cheeks. Ripped jeans. When they found pants or jeans, sometimes they would patch them up together and sell them again in Chor Bazaar or some, in their own local markets or something.
So there was an entire ecosystem that lived off Bombay's waste.
Yeah, lots of cell phones. As you know, India is the world's second largest cell phone market. Lots of cell phones come there, and invariably waste pickers will be using cell phones they found there. What can be refurbished goes into the second-hand cell phone market, but what easily can't be refurbished goes there. And so the waste pickers would fix them up and start using them again, and then it would stop working, and you couldn't get in touch with them.
So what are some of the characters that you came across that compelled you to tell their stories? Some of the lead characters like Farzana or her father Haider Ali, or tell us about 3 or 4 of the characters who were these larger than life personas and what inspired you about them.
Sure. I would say the 4 families that I followed in great detail. In fact, I would say the 4 families were equally reported. When I first started, I thought that it would be about Vitabai, Kamble, and Salman, these 2 women who had worked there for about 40 years, both single mothers, like they had lost their widowed at a young age with young children, and so began working on Salma particularly, I think her child was 100 days old when her husband passed away, and Mitabai, her husband, passed away a little bit later, but certainly they had brought up their children, worked there their whole life, and made their life there. So I thought at first I wrote it as a magazine piece about these two women.
Mm-hmm.
And then it became clear that I had, I met Muharram Ali and I began reporting on his family. And that became a very interesting strand because we had lent to him many, many times. And it seemed that he would do better. But very charismatic, very interesting. But his family really went through a very difficult time later. So then I reported a lot about him. But increasingly, the story began to be about Farzana, who was born at the feet of the Garbage Mountains, grew up on their slopes, and turned 18 while I was reporting this book. And it was through her body, through her person, through her personality that you saw the Garbage Mountains, the city, that larger story of even maybe this development in our country, like how that was happening, literally through her person. And so the story, and also a lot of things really did happen to her that would almost make you feel that this was fiction rather than non-fiction, but it is all true. And so the story really did have to be about her. It's just that there was so much trauma that at first she didn't want to talk about it. I didn't want to ask about it. So it took a really long time for us to really begin talking, and then she was just all over. She was all over those drafts. It was clear that it had to be about her.
And the book follows her life actually from when she's a teenager till she's a mother of two children, right? The book goes on till Farzana has got married and has had her children.
That's right. Just 2 weeks ago, she actually had her third child.
Oh my God. Yeah,
Yeah, that's right.
lovely.
So yeah, it is about how she was born at the feet of the Garbage Mountains. We follow like when she was 2, when the first solid waste rules were made, and evictions began happening. The municipal corporation would evict them, and they would come back to live there. She was addicted to the garbage slopes. She wanted to continue to work there, live there.
A lot of the rag pickers you write about seem to be absolutely involved and almost obsessed with the mountains. And they, like you said, Farzana, addicted to going back again and again. Can you talk about that great lure of the mountain that enthralls the community?
Yeah, they always felt that a treasure from the city, a forgotten treasure, was only one handful away. They could just look a little more and they would find gold, they would find diamonds, they would find emerald. They always told you somebody had found a big emerald, somebody had found diamond dust. They would wash through the mud and the garbage to sift through that to see if they could find some gold dust. So they believe that the city's forgotten fortunes could wash up. And it's also the mirage that many of us also have of, oh, we could just get a little wealthy if we only
The
did
next
this,
job, the next car, the same kind
exactly.
of. So that is why you brought out the shared humanity between a city, a very prosperous, so-called prosperous, celebrated financial capital, and its dark shadow, its twin. And it's so elegantly done. What intrigued me was how you managed to win such a deep level of trust. I mean, the book is not a story told from the outside. You're actually being given the thoughts and emotions from the inside of these characters. So, how did you manage to elicit so much depth from your characters?
So I had known them before I began writing about the book. Because we used to lend to them. So, like Farzana, for example, I've known her since she was 14 years old, and now she's 23 or so. So many of them who are children are now teenagers. Teenagers are mothers of their own children. So, I mean, I would say that there was a degree of trust. Having said that, I tried to do this in as transparent and respectful a manner as possible. So when I first thought I would write about it, I told them that now that you're speaking to me, this is not related to any kind of money. This is related to your story being printed. And there were one or two people one person in particular, I remember, who I wanted to write about, who decided he was a bit frightened, and he thought that surely somebody would get involved at some point, and he decided not to get involved, not to speak to me, and I respected that.
Because there's a lot of fear there about they're vulnerable people and the fear of the law, of some rival something or the other. So they are in a fragile position. So I can understand that they were hesitant, but obviously your empathy and humanity has been able to overcome any kind of hesitation, because I've rarely seen a book that has got such a deep, grainy texture to it. I mean, I've read Catherine Boo's book on Beyond the Beautiful Forevers. There are other great books on Bombay by men, but somehow your book has a very female perspective, because you're talking about the ordinary minutiae of these people's lives in a very humane way. So obviously you've been able to win their trust, and they have shared so much with you. But before we go on about the story, tell the viewers why these mountains, how they came to exist, and why they are still where they are after 26 years of court cases. And how did they start, for instance?
Sure, they started with a plague pandemic, if I may call it, of 1896.
How ironic.
Yeah, exactly. So at that point, plague ran through the city. Obviously, as you know, plague runs with travels through rats. And later it was found that this rat had also come from China. As as the city was growing, its garbage, its filth was growing, rats traveled through it, carrying plague with them. And the plague and the plague control measures were leading to violence in the city, discontentment, migration, and obviously illness and death. And as a way to control it, the measures like police were going into people's houses, they were dismantling houses, quarantining people, sending them to the hospital where people thought they were being sent only to die alone. So, they didn't.
And this was all against the backdrop of the colonial administration. This was the backdrop of the British. Yeah. Right. So there was a heightened sense of us and them, probably.
Exactly. And so the British decided at that point that it was best to push away the dirt of the city, the growing garbage of the city, and they bought in 1897 this 823-acre space in Deonar, which formed the edge of the city. Really, it was a swampy marsh at the time, and they began they made a train line, a special train line called the Kachra train, and Bombay's garbage started going there and filling up this swampy marsh, and the colonial plan.
But it wasn't meant to last forever, right? That's what you've said in the book. Yeah.
Yeah, they actually thought that this was a money, they would begin to earn money on this, which is basically that this would fill up in 25 years, and the municipality would then rent it out to farmers and earn a lakh of rupees a year by renting it out to farmers. Except that the swamp kept filling and filling and filling, and there was through the decades, there was independence, and Maharashtra was formed. Mumbai became the capital, and this is growing. It's growing. The city is coming closer to this place. This is no more outside the city.
I can't see Saumya, so I think I'll just wait until her video. Yeah, I think we got a cut off. Yeah. There was a poor connection. So you were telling us about the Deonar mountains and how they started. It was
that's right. So
as a measure against the plague of. I can hear you.
Yeah, that's right. And so they thought that it would fill up in 25 years. They would rent it out to farmers and earn money on it. But what ended up happening was this was a forgotten corner of the city, and it just kept filling up, filling up, filling up. There was independence, and then Maharashtra was formed, Mumbai was growing, and along with waste, the trains continue to run twice a day, bringing the city's garbage to this place. And along with the garbage, those people that they considered to be extraneous to the city, those who lived on train tracks, on pavements, on places like that, and seemed to be something of an eyesore in the city, were also sent to live where else but next to garbage. So they began to echo out these difficult lives, sorting through this garbage and reselling it. So that is how this place that was supposed to close in 25 years is now
Yes, Saumya
122
again.
years old.
Hi, yeah. Saumya.
Yeah, can you hear me? Can you hear me, Malvika? In the meanwhile, maybe we can just take a quick comment that had come in, which is, what is it like to be in the shoes of rag pickers? Yeah, medical waste, yes. There are cases made out by the police. Right now, there are subjudice that say that medical waste was arriving there, although there is a biomedical waste incinerator, but some forms of biomedical waste are said to have come there, and those cases are still going on.
So what are the hazards that the rag picking community of Deonar face on a daily basis? You mentioned medical waste. That must be very, very harmful, dangerous if people are exposed to it. And what else? There is fumes, there is noxious gases, there are glass pieces which cut them. What else? I mean,
I would say that first of all, the poverty and the hazards were on their person. Most waste pickers you meet will have cuts, will have bruises from having stumbled onto glass, from having fallen there into the swamp, from having wire gone into their feet, their hands. So they'll have cuts, they'll have bruises. Life expectancy, but then there are the more invisible, the less visible. Yeah. How do you feel getting into the shoes of rag pickers? So I'll just take you into their shoes a little bit. That I feel the more hazardous, the greater hazards were the more invisible hazards, which is that this place. If you see the registers before 2016, it burnt quite often. There were fires often. Maybe the fires were lit by the waste pickers, but what it meant was that they were inhaling noxious smoke.
And let me just put, as an aside, fires generally are lit by rag pickers to melt down everything but the metal so that they can get to the metal quicker.
That's right. But also the municipality says, not incorrectly, that all the garbage layered together, slowly decomposing, there's an accumulation of methane. Landfills are a major source of methane gas, which is highly combustible. So in the summer months, when the summer sun, the heat falls on this decomposing garbage, methane is released and fires do happen spontaneously as well. And of course, waste pickers also lit them. And so inhaling all these hazardous gases from the landfill, the fires, the smoke, certainly most waste pickers have asthma. They have, there is an incidence of collapsed
tuberculosis.
Tuberculosis, but tuberculosis probably comes more from being in an enclosed space, but it is there. Multiple drug-resistant tuberculosis, asthma, collapsed lungs, interstitial lung disease, which causes the space between lungs to harden and you can't breathe. So lots of diseases like that. And life expectancy in 2009, there was 39 years. When I looked at the data after that, it had stayed in a similar age range. It had not gone up by too much.
Gosh. But what is so extraordinary is that you've taken what most would consider a dark and desolate subject, and yet the book is throbbing with so much love and hope and tenderness and joy. And even when you talk about doing research and spending time with the rag pickers, you mentioned that some of those were the best years of your life because they strengthened you. They gave you so much a feeling of buoyancy and hope. Talk about that. I mean, how did you take such a dark or a desolate subject and make it a book that engages readers across the landscape?
Yeah. There's also a comment that has come that what are their dreams made of waste? So I would say that this aspect came from the waste pickers themselves. When I even spoke to them before I ever went there, when I did go there, they never presented it as a place of desolation, of darkness. They presented it as a place of opportunity, that waste is never going to reduce, these garbage mountains are never going to reduce. I know somebody who found a emerald as big as your palm. How big is your palm, right? I know somebody who found an emerald. I never found that person, but there was always this urban
It was
legend.
always somebody else.
Exactly. Or oh, I found earrings, and they would wear those earrings. So for a child, that child, it was a childhood lived there. It was a place where children were growing up, teenage alcohol
Of hidden
parties,
treasures, of hidden
hidden
treasures.
treasures, the
Yes.
hope of finding hidden treasures that keeps you going. Um, and so it was a place of dreams. It was uh, a place where children grew up. Like, for example, for a child, finding ice cream, expired sweets would reach there, and they would eat those sweets, those ice creams. Sometimes the expired ice cream, they would say, would be very likely buried in trash. And as soon as the trucks turned back, they would go, unbury it, pull out the ice cream, and on a hot summer day, eat an ice cream. And that is the source of joy for any child anywhere, to have just discovered a cup of
Free
ice
ice
cream.
cream. Yeah. But was it easy for you to engage with people whose lives are so fragile and vulnerable? Were you able to come back away from Deonar and switch off, or at least allay your own feelings of fear and concern for them? Because they lived lives which are really on the edge. So, how didn't that overwhelm you? Is what I really wanted to know when I read the book. Did
Uh,
their traumas overwhelm you as a writer and as a concerned person?
it didn't. I mean, I wouldn't say. I mean, I'm not the best person to analyze myself, but I wouldn't say that it overwhelmed me. But it certainly. I mean, I was totally gripped by it. I
You
wouldn't say
were
that
totally?
totally gripped by it. I was in it. Like I wouldn't say addicted, but I was immersed in it. I was immersed in it completely. I wouldn't say that I switched off when I came home. Like, there were certainly days when I would think of the children, especially Asra, Mehroon, young children living in a place like this, very beautiful, delicate, fragile children living in a place that was not very secure, without a father in the house. I certainly thought about them even when I came home. I'm not a great one for switching off, and I certainly did think about them, and I wouldn't say that it overwhelmed me, but it immersed me completely.
I can see that. Um, when you were writing the book, was there anything that completely took you aback, shocked you about this existence of these people? Is there any one incident that you can narrate which went beyond the pale? Maybe it is the incident of how Farzana was said to have been inhabited by shaitans. There's the book has a very deep, magic, realistic kind of dark undertow of myth. And how did you respond to that? Because you know that perhaps these are not true, but you were telling me the other day that if people lived in a place like Deonar, what else would they imagine but shaitans and evil spirits?
So I would say that right from the very first, literally the first days and weeks when I met them, they would tell you stories about, some shaitan, some khabis. And I just, at that point as a lender, felt that this was not really of concern to me. I should just not, get into this. And so I kind of avoided dealing with it. But I saw that trauma piling up. I also saw these stories coming up. Like, for example, how did you ask a simple question as a microfinance lender? How did you make your house? What did you make your house with? Tin sheets, plastic sheets, yeah. And there was, a huge caboose floating inside my house once. And the caboose was asking for rent, and he said that this was his house. And this was across religions. Certainly, Vitabai, who's a Hindu, also told me that if you spat on the garbage mountains, a spirit would rise from the spit.
What would rise from the spit?
A spirit would, a rakshas,
okay,
or a spirit would rise
yeah.
from the spit. Yeah. So this was not, this was across both religions. At first I dismissed it, but then I thought that when I was actually writing the book, then I thought that if this was their explanation, then it was not fair for me to dismiss it. That I think that I thought that I should have a more scientific explanation for their illnesses, which is it could have been plastic poisoning that caused their illnesses, inhaling smoke, inhaling gases, pollution. But if they said that it was, they relied on these ancient myths and stories and religion and religious iconography, if I may say so, to explain this, then I could not, it was not my place to question that. I just had to give it equal space, equal weightage as any other plausible explanation for what may have happened and what gripped their lives.
And I think that is one of the reasons why this is such a compelling book, because rather than see them through the telescope of a writer, you've actually gone down to the heart of their existence and not been judgmental, but told their story so which you've afforded them with so much dignity. You've never patronized them. You've told it from their point of view, which makes it so extraordinary. What has been the reaction to the book so far? Have from your friend circles, from people who read it, readers who picked it up at a bookstore? What feedback are you getting?
It's been warm. It's been a very warm response as it's released. Friends have written to me, reviewers have written. I see, I'm not on social media, but sometimes I see people on Instagram. It's wonderful to see people making it their own, seeing their own lives in it, their own experiences in it, taking some life lessons from it, from these waste pickers, from their lives. As you know, many of these waste pickers have given their own learnings in life, right? And so when readers take them and make them their own, adapt them to their lives, see this as a mirror of their lives, then I certainly feel it's wonderful to see people, readers.
What has gripped readers the most? But what do you, which part? There are so many aspects to your book. There's the larger policy aspect. There is the aspect of disparity and inequity between different parts of the city. There is a love story. There is a very anthropological, almost look at a community. What do you think has gripped readers the most about this? About
sure.
your book?
I would say certainly it's Farzana's story. Lots of people reacted to her growing years on the garbage mountains. That this is also a coming of age story, a child growing up on the mountains, birthday parties, alcohol parties, finding love in a dark place like this, where you feel that life and love do not exist. Then she does find it. Her spirit, her gumption to continue. Like I certainly have felt on so many occasions, and I've told her this, that if I was in your place, I would have just curled up in bed and not gotten up for like weeks together. So people are finding strength in her, and that's also wonderful. I have had some readers also who found Justice Hope's character to be very inspiring and impressive. He was the judge who presided over this case and tried to move the mountains for many, many years. And just the week that this book was released, he was elevated to the Supreme Court. And so the very first interview I did for this book, the interviewer asked me, did you end the book because he got transferred?
Yeah,
So
he's a very admirable character in your book. Has he read the book?
I
Has
don't
he
think
read the
he's read
book?
the book. No, I don't
Okay.
think he's read the book. But certainly people have drawn strength from the fact that it is that you could try to do something, not give up, but keep trying to do things. I myself was quite fascinated also by his character. I spent more than 300 hours in court watching court proceedings. All of the characters have touched a chord. I obviously have had a many year relationship with so many of these characters. So I am. I think my attachment is a lot also with the children, Ashra and Mehrun. Ashra was 8 when I began reporting, or 7 when I began reporting the story. She's a teenager now. So I watched her through these very fragile years, where she lived alone in the house, embroidering, no food in the house. Father had left them, and they would just be doing embroidery through long afternoons on hungry stomachs. So I feel they need a book of their own.
Yes, definitely.
The children of this
Many
book need a
books.
book of their own.
Yeah, true, true. Um, what is the now? You have also, besides writing this riveting story, you have researched very, very deeply into the whole issue of garbage and waste management and landfills all across the world. So, what is the solution to places like Deonar? Because there are places, Moscow has its own garbage mountains, and New York has them, and London has them. And do you see any way out of this mess?
Yeah, I think it's a
What
much larger.
ideally should be done with
Yeah, I think
Deonar?
it's a much larger question of how our economy is, right? Like how we are encouraged to consume also. Uh, like for example, the fact that gadgets are meant to last now, have shorter lives than they've ever had before. That you can't service them. They are meant to end up at landfills. I was just reading the other day like how waste pickers often tell me that they found gold. Actually, 15% of or 10% of the world's leftover gold lands up at landfills because it's in cell phones, which end up at
Ah,
landfills. And the
yes.
lifespan of cell phones is actually going down because replaceable parts have reduced. You don't get replaceable
True.
parts for cell phones, so they end up at landfills. Fast fashion, you're meant to consume it and throw it away. We are encouraged to consume by society, by companies, by the world around us to consume
But
a lot quickly
okay,
and throw
so
it
that
away
is
and
one
think,
that yeah, so that is one aspect of the problem, the consumption cycle, which modern life has inflicted on all of us. What about what the authorities can do with places like Deonar, which have grown to these mountainous, heights? What ideally should be done, or what could be done?
yeah, sure. I mean, the government actually, as you know, the government has just announced, I think, many billion-dollar plan, tens of thousands of crores plan to reduce garbage mountains. I'm sure that plan will be taking off, pretty soon. That was flagged off, I think, just last month. There was a provision made in the budget this year, and that plan is going to take off. I don't know what I'm sure that for different landfills, they'll plan different things like a bioreactor, biomining, waste to energy, waste to compost. There's lots of options, and I certainly will leave that to the scientific
But
experts to
what will
come up with
happen to
that.
the community then? I
Yeah.
mean,
So
what will happen to the people who?
my only sort of input on that would be that I feel that a technocratic solution cannot be the only solution. That the only thing that left these waste mountains left for all these years left in the hands of waste pickers. And so, what solution can you have for these places without thinking of the lives and futures of these waste pickers?
Absolutely, absolutely. Um, I mean, there's just so much to talk about the book, but one of the things I read in an interview that you gave was how influenced you were by the writing of Gabriel Garcia Marquez and Steinbeck, and I found bits of your book echoing the very lyrical sentences of Arundhati Roy. um, Talk about the writing style, because what is really amazing is that not only is this a powerful and compelling true story, but the lyricism and the writings qualities of the book are just very, very enchanting and amazing. So, how did you, you know, talk about your life as a writer and a reader?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that I was maybe the writing comes from having removed yourself a little bit and just let the reader feel. I think I wanted it just to be a visceral experience for the reader as it was for me, and that when you go there, you stand there and you see it like mountains of garbage melting into the sea. Uh, that is how I saw it. That is how I felt it, and I certainly wanted the reader to feel it as a visceral experience. This
You
place,
describe
these
the
people.
changing weather and the sky so beautifully and so vividly throughout the book.
Yeah, this is
There's so much writerly detail. So
so you
you had
seasons
said,
changing on the garbage mountains. Uh,
yeah, yeah.
these were things which because were often talked about, and I was also often walking the place by myself just to experience when they said, "Oh, pumpkins grew there. Did they really grow there?" So a lot of it came from research and making sure that this is all true. But yes, when you sit there and you write, then to know to have all that detail down and to write it. Was one of the great joys of the writing this book, I must say. um, Also, when they were telling me, I mean, I spent many years writing this book, and when they were telling me, there was a lot happening with them. There was a lot of trauma, a lot of I mean, unhappy, difficult, extremely difficult things happening to them. And so when I came back and I would write my notes at home, then I often wondered, like, why is this happening? How do I write it as a writer? If they are possessed, or if they have tremendous illnesses, how do I really write this as a writer? And so I would fall back on my bookshelf and to see how so many other writers who I had read for so many years had dealt with these things. And so it was with Marquez that I found that the folkloric traditions, or that the voices of these people, which is waste, in my case is waste pickers, but in his case is indigenous people, were given just as equal space as, say, some Catholic priest, in my case, say, authorities or government, so that you get the experience of this place. The experience is in the documents. I don't deny that. I relied on them tremendously, but I also relied on their stories and gave it the same space so that the reader feels the experience of being there.
After reading it, I thought a lot about how it reminded me of writers like Dostoevsky, Gorky, Chekhov, and you had once said that the influence, and you also are a reader of these authors, and you said about the influence of Russian authors on you. I realized later that it was also the writers noticing, holding, and articulating the most deeply held emotions, not letting them go unseen against the backdrop of the large swathes of history. So, this ability to take very, very personal lives and against the backdrop of a much larger socio-economic reality is something that has made this book, given this book so much depth. How did you achieve that uh, result?
Yeah, no, thank you. On this issue of Russian writers, many of us grew up reading the Russian greats, and I always used to wonder that do Russians feel emotions more deeply? I remember saying that to
Yeah.
you, like, how is it you read Anna Karenina or
Yes.
like War and Peace, Brothers Karamazov, and you wonder, do they
Mm.
feel emotions more deeply than us? Is human suffering
So all that
sometimes in
vodka. Yeah.
or is it that sometimes in the large swaths of things happening that the small human emotions just get go unnoticed in a country like maybe ours? And then I realized that it was the writers of Russia who were bringing out that and chiseling and holding and writing and articulating that emotion, the individual grief that people felt, or trauma that they went through. And certainly all the great fiction writers, but their present day successors, Svetlana Alexievich, who writes non-fiction in this format, with the same emotional depth and resonance, is somebody like I think all of us really learn from. That how do you articulate emotion in that way, that it should not just go unnoticed in the vast swaths of things happening. Yes, India is
True.
rising economically, lots of people are getting lifted out of poverty, but at the same time, there is tremendous poverty that does still exist today, marginalization, and all of this is true.
Has there been any response from the powers that be, the authorities who could who weigh in on places like Deonar, municipal authorities or state authorities? Has anybody reached out after reading the book, or has it made any impact on Deonar and its status quo right now?
No, not to me, but there is already a plant planned at Deonar. There is a plant supposed to come by 2023. The contract has been given out. So I look forward to that. I'm sure it's going to come soon. And I hope that with that, the future of this place, I'm sure it is going to change in some ways, and their lives are going to change.
What has the impact of having the book out been on their lives? Have they been contacted by television crews? Or, I mean, that will happen. As this book, it's very early days for the book. I see it absolutely reaching very, very great heights, being read, being filmed, making a huge impact in the world. And where it released during the pandemic, so I'm sure you can't do much touring or promotion or anything, but word of mouth. I mean, I have told people about the book. They've gone out and bought it, and
Thank
my
you.
God, they're thanking me for recommending it, and I would recommend it to everybody as a must-read book, especially for us in Bombay. What does it tell you about the apathy of the city? I mean, most people didn't even know that such a life exists, cheek by jowl to where we live.
Places like this live in invisibility. So and when I come back, like you were asking me, did I feel overwhelmed? I don't, but I do find when I come back into the city. Yeah, I hope so. I hope so. Do you think this will bring awareness to the lives of these people? Yeah, I certainly hope so. So this is the only answer that I can give you. That when I see in the city there'll be posters everywhere that, oh, you should segregate waste and this and that. I don't disagree with that, but I think the problem is a much larger one than one of just segregating waste. I think it is of looking at these lives, of feeling for these people, these lives made of our waste. This place that exists in invisibility. And I think just as a writer, the only thing that we can do is to shed light on it. And I think just the fact that somebody read about them, somebody wrote about them and read them, that there is light where there was darkness, something shifts by just writing about them.
I think some more questions
and the
are
waste
coming
pickers
in.
say this sometimes, that at least somebody will know how we lived. Somebody will know our story. When I began reporting it, Salma Sheikh once told me, you bring a video, nobody will believe your words.
True. And how has it changed you, writing it and now its publication and engaging so deeply with this subject? What are the changes in yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I obviously had a very close relationship with many of these people, and I often tell them, like, especially some of the women like Farzana, Hira Siddiqui, Mehrun, in so many ways, we look alike, like, when they will be almost of a similar size, which is not to deny my privilege by any means, but I certainly feel that they have this tremendous spirit, this ability to fight adversity, to fight against every odd, and to fight for their lives, for what they believe should be their life, and that is something that I've learned tremendously from them.
So it's an edifying experience being with them.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Let's see if there are other questions, and how are we doing for time? Okay.
Yeah.
So
So
Deepak.
far, men have written about Mumbai. Recently, few women are now writing.
Yeah.
Does your writing bring out the sensitive, human, and emotional aspects of the lives of rag pickers because of this?
I think we've touched this, but elaborate more, because I definitely felt your book was from a women's point of view, much more than other books on Bombay have been. So talk about that.
Yeah, I think it's possible. I think a lot of time, I did spend a lot of time with the male characters in the book, and they've always been very warm to me and protective and welcoming and all of that. So I wouldn't like I would say some of my closest relationships go with Hyder Ali and Muharram Ali. But having said that, as a woman, obviously you spend time, and that is one reason I never saw it as a place of darkness, because you just imagine you're sitting in a house when you go and it's suppose there are women in the house, right? And they'll cook you something, you'll have tea, their children will be in and out, they'll be laughing, they'll be joking, they'll be doing embroidery, they'll be gossip, they'll be discussing love affairs, marriages, children, and in the middle of that suddenly they'll say, you remember the time when my daughter passed away and she was in hospital and we couldn't help her out and she died, and also and so had tuberculosis and they passed away. So the stories of tremendous trauma are interwoven with stories of joy and laughter and humor, and they'll poke fun at my
Which is
skinniness.
what the emotional life of women is.
Yes, and
Most
which is
women
how this
have,
book is
yeah,
also.
true. Saumya, please read some passages from the book. I hope you have
Oh,
it, and or you
yeah, yeah.
can't.
Do I see
Could you read a
consumerism and
little?
wastage changing? I
Okay.
think certainly
Hmm.
there is an increased interest in people thinking about their lives, living more sustainably. Um, how how do we consume? How do we live? I certainly do see that. My only thing is that I do feel yes, we should live more sustainably. But by the same token, waste is not created only by us individuals. We should not feel that just because we used a plastic bottle, then the entire landfill. But I think there's certainly great structural issues, institutions that need to change, the legal systems that need to be
And
a
you
little more
must
responsive.
mention that Bombay, Deonar receives 1/10 of the waste of cities like New York and London.
That's right. That's right. Uh, yeah, I mean, we produce in India. I would say that we produce about a half a kilo of waste per person per day, compared to in the US where it could be up to 10 kilos a day. So we produce a small fraction. We consume a small fraction, and we produce a small throw away a small fraction of what they throw away. And it's also true that in India we get imported waste, which I've written about.
Yeah.
So we'll get paper
So we
boxes,
in India
cartons,
we
etc.
produce
from the
half a
UK.
kilo per person. You were saying, and compare that to a developed, New York or London. How much waste would a person produce?
Yeah, that's it. They would produce something like seven,
I
eight,
think we've
9 kilos
lost
of
our
waste per person per day.
connection.
Yeah, I do hope it brings awareness towards the life of these people and waste pickers on landfills across the country. Most landfills in our country do have waste pickers working on them. While working on this book, I happened to meet researchers who are working on Ahmedabad, on Delhi, on the different landfills of Delhi, Chennai, Bangalore. And there are waste pickers, migrant communities of waste pickers, really the bottom dregs of our society working in these places. And I hope that this brings light to the life of many of these waste pickers who are working across the country on landfills.
But is Deonar the largest garbage neighborhood in India of all the
Yes,
cities? It
yes. In
is.
fact,
Okay.
it's sometimes called the largest in Asia, and possibly the
Ah,
largest untreated landfill in the world.
wow. Um, I would love you to read a couple of passages from the book, but you are getting questions.
Sure. Or would you like to
Would
see
you
a movie
like to
like
see it as a
Slumdog
movie,
Millionaire?
like Slumdog Millionaire? Of course.
Yeah, I think
Harshil
if it's
Shah is
sensitively
asking.
made, sure. Yeah, yeah, if it's sensitively made, sure. Should I just quickly pick out a passage to read?
A question came in just before you begin reading about would you like to
Do
see
read a
it
paragraph if
depicted?
possible.
Okay.
Yeah, this is about how this very Bombay experience of how during the monsoons rain comes into people's houses, and in this case it's even more acute because it's the garbage mountains, so that the force of garbage coming down from the mountains into their homes is quite a bit. Um, so it's just a short paragraph that I'll read from there. Farzana was growing to be all arms and legs and what her sisters called an adha dimag, or half a brain. The rising mountains had leaked into her mind, they thought. As the peaks rose higher, the rains gushed down harder every monsoon, bringing the slopes into their home. Farzana fell asleep to the clatter of the rain and woke up to see her slippers floating close to her amid unknown possessions that had flowed down the slopes. Blearily, she folded her salwar over her knees and waded through the water to retrieve her books and shoes drifting through the neighboring homes. Then she walked up the squelching slopes away from school. She and her sisters dragged reeking wooden planks that Jahangir and their brother Alamgir, the third of the 9 children, had nailed to the walls at home and piled her soaking household on them. At night, they clambered onto the planks to sleep amid their belongings while the mountain-filled waters sloshed below. When the rains paused, Farzana helped Shakimun throw out the water that filled their homes and bring out their damp provisions and the trash they had stored, which had turned to mush to catch the sun peeking out into their slim lane. Everything she brought out her water-stained notebooks. Everything she had learned had blurred.
Beautiful. Giving so much detail, you have also kept the poetry of the rain seeping into her head, of her writing being blurred. I mean, there was such lyrical imagery this book has, and done with such a lightness of touch and a lot of mastery. Okay, we've got another question.
Was it a
Was it a
story told
story
of
to, yeah?
Was it a story told over the years through these characters, or what could you observe, or both? They were telling me, and I was observing. So there were many stories that they told, but also many stories that they didn't tell, but that I also observed and asked them about. Uh, so
And you
it
also
was both.
mentioned that there were some things that they didn't want to talk about, and you let it be until they were ready. And then often it would just outpour, it would be an outpouring from them.
Yeah, certainly. There were times when
Uh,
they didn't want to speak about things, and I had to just let it go. And then I think they respected that. And some months later, I would find that they would themselves say, "Oh, that day you were asking me about this. Do you know what I was wearing that day? Do you know what so and so said to me on that day?" They appreciated the fact that they were being given that space. And in the end, I would say there was almost nothing that they didn't speak about.
did you hold anything back to protect them? Were there bits of their lives that you thought would not really stand up to scrutiny? Did you have to use your discretion there?
No, I didn't hold back on anything, but I certainly checked and rechecked everything to make sure that what they were saying was true. Some of it was sounded fantastical or whatever. So I certainly checked everything, although it's coming through the mouth of maybe one person. I did make sure that other people had also heard it, seen it, experienced it. Did you also find
Which
arms
is
and
what
legs? Did you
makes the
also?
whole writing of this book so extraordinary, because it's one thing to be a skillful author and conjure up these stories and these words and but to have to do it with real events and real people. I can just imagine the enormous work of fact checking and of proof, all of that. How long did it take to research, and how long did it take to think about the book, and then how long did it take to write it?
I mean, it went on simultaneously, but I'll just give you an example of this. Waste pickers would often say that a slaughterhouse, abattoir, or animal waste came there. And so I often wondered that was this really true? Was this a true story or not? And then once I remember the MMRDA, Mumbai Metropolitan Region Development Authority, has an office in BKC. And they have a small library. And I remember going through documents there and actually seeing, they had actually written there that, okay, there is an area demarcated in the dumping ground where animal waste goes, slaughterhouse animal entrails go, all of those things. So a lot of what they're seeing, it's not just oral history, it is backed up by documents. Like when Vitabai Kamble told me that there was a train that used to come there, I thought like, she's cooking it up. This is a crazy, fantastical story. How could a train have come here? And yet I remember sometime later I found myself at Oxford University's Bodleian Library, and I began looking at colonial records. And indeed, there had been a kachra train that had come from the city to Deonar only to deposit waste twice a day, just as she had described it, and that she had worked to get waste out of.
As advice to other writers, I've heard you talk a lot about the advantage of distance, of doing your research and then going away into a space where you can have a perspective on all of it. I know that you received a couple of fellowships during the writing of the book. How important is this distance and this perspective in a writer's life?
I think it's very important to be, the first and most important thing is to be very close to your subject. So just stay totally immersed. At that point, I feel I had no distance at all. And so while writing, by the time I sat down to write, I had already known these people for several years, like 4 or 5 years probably. And so I had, my head was full of stories, my notebooks were full of stories. And so I just needed that space to process it, to write it in a way that brought out their characters, not just the events as they happen, but really their character, the emotion of it. And so to that extent, certainly residencies helped. I think that writers should think a little bit in terms of how are they processing this. Like things come to you in a slightly raw way, but they don't have to be written necessarily in that way, which is not to say that you hold back on anything. You don't, to protect sources. I think as long as it's true and it has been given to you knowingly, you don't need to worry about just holding back on it. But while writing it, certainly I felt that residencies helped, because I had all these notebooks filled with material, head full of material, and to think, what is this material saying to me? What are these people saying to me? What is this place saying? I think this place is like the story is almost like a parable for our times, for our world, that this was a tiny place that was saying something about the whole world, and giving it that thought, I think, really helped.
Was there any point in during this process that you felt like giving up? Giving up on the book, on the writing? And
yeah, no, I had wonderful writer friends who never gave me that option. Certainly I faced rejection at different points of time. I think the most difficult step was the first step, because I had stopped writing completely. I was running my non-profit on a daily basis, really enjoying that experience, and so I was not writing at all. And so that the first one, the first step of just writing was the most difficult one. But once I started, the stories do fill you. You do feel, at every step I felt inadequate to tell their stories, that I wouldn't be able to do them justice, that they would come out in that raw form. But that there was this tremendous, it was clear to me that there was this tremendous strength and grit and all this richness in character that had to come out. And so I felt inadequate and was constantly trying to keep pace with the material that I was collecting.
How many drafts did it go through?
That's even hard to say.
Drafts did the book go through?
I had two wonderful editors. First of all, my friend Geeta Anand, who would read and just talk me through things. And then I had two wonderful editors, Cecily Gayford in London and Alessandra Pastagli in New York, who worked with me on it. Both their edits have given slightly different dimensions to the book. Their own editions of the book are slightly different. The titles of the book are slightly different.
The titles are different. The covers are different.
Yes. And they each brought a richness. They each elevated the book in such a way that even I could not have imagined. So I think working
Indian
with the
readers
was a great gift, and I wish I could just keep working with them forever.
Indian readers will get this version in bookshops.
That's right.
Or
that's right.
Okay.
This is it.
Yeah. Okay. I think we've. Is there anything else you want to say?
No, it's been an absolute pleasure to be here and to be talking with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Will Harshil